All right, so we have Betty Brewer here again with us, the president and CEO of Minnetrista. We're so excited to be here again and collaborating with you guys because there's a huge tie to the history of the Ball brothers and the Ball family.
Absolutely.
Which we're going to talk a little bit about. And of course, the Ball jars. You guys have a huge collection of Ball jars and Ball Blue Books, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So before we get into the jars themselves, because these are very exciting, a lot of people always have questions about the antique jars. Let's talk a little bit about how the Ball brothers came here to Indiana, because they weren't originally here. They weren't set up here.
Right. The original Ball glass manufacturing company was in Buffalo, New York, and they were doing just fine. They actually did have a fire in the late 80s and rebuilt and were producing the very next year. But during that process, Frank Ball in particular got wind of the gas boom that was happening in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, that areas, particularly when he was in Cleveland on another business trip. So he pumped on down to Findlay, Ohio to hear about the gas boom in Findlay, and wasn't overly taken with his reception. They wanted to know what he was going to give them rather than what they might offer the company.
Gotcha.
So while he was there, he received a telegram from businessmen in Muncie inviting him to come to Muncie. He's like, okay.
Why not?
You know, so he and actually Edmund had been traveling with him, but Ed had gone back to Buffalo. So Frank came on down by himself. And while he wasn't overly taken with Muncie at the time, it was still sort of very pioneer, and of course they came from the big city, Buffalo, right? He was very taken with the people, and he felt that all of the gentlemen were courteous, kind, and businesslike, which was very important, Frank. Was that business-like part. So before he left, and then a little afterwards, they kept negotiating, and eventually the Muncie business community, which of course was filled with entrepreneurs themselves, offered the company, and there are a couple of stories here, so somewhere between 3 and 7 acres of land for a new factory, somewhere between $5,000 and $7,500 in cash to help build the factory. And then the really important stuff was gas well, because that was the whole point of coming here. Natural gas was going to be a great energy-saving resource in the creation of glass jars. And railroad access, which Frank absolutely demanded, railroad access. So they moved here in they started building in 1987, and barely 6 months later, the factory was opened. February 1988, up and running.
That's pretty quick, 6 months.
It's amazing. And, you know, the rest, as they say, is history.
So now Minnetrista itself, actually, it was one of the Ball brothers' mansions. Is that correct?
Right.
And
Frank
it had burned down, and then they rebuilt Minnetrista, which as it stands today. Is that right?
That's correct. Frank's home, and nobody was living in it at the time. There were a couple of like an ad agency and a couple of businesses renting the space. But in 1967, it burned to the ground, and it was and anyone who has family totally from Muncie and who's grew up here, has heard the story, has seen the pictures, knows that it just went up like a torch, because it was originally a wood clapboard-faced home that was then later faced in limestone. And so there was this space, there was a gap between the two original walls that created a chimney. And so it just went up. But on the positive side,
we have Minnetrista.
Well, you know, the family wondered right away what they should do with the space, but there were really two events that sort of pushed it forward. And that was Margaret Ball Petty, who was Edmund F. Ball, the second Edmund Ball.
A lot to remember,
there were
right?
actually many Edmund Balls. But the second one, his cousin wrote a letter to Ed in 1978, said, what are we going to do with Uncle Frank's place? And her thought was to create an art center, an art museum, or maybe expand the art museum that was at Ball State University. And so they started doing a little research, and then sadly Elizabeth Ball, who had continued to live in Oakhurst all this time, passed away in 1982. She left her entire estate, however, to the Ball Brothers Foundation. And so with this infusion of new funds, they went, aha, we can actually do something. So a lot of research, a lot of field trips and everything, and the Minnetrista Center was born for history, gardens, art, All of that.
All the wonderful stuff we can enjoy today,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
So I know people are probably itching to find out more about these jars. So let's go ahead and turn it over to, I believe this is the buffalo jar, right?
This is the buffalo jar, but in the interest of all transparency, this is a replica.
It's a replica, yep.
There are very few buffalo jars in existence. Buffalo means it was literally made in Buffalo, New York, and in the well, I'm not going to say I remember which year, but some replicas were made. We do have several of the original buffalo jars. We just don't bring them outside to something like this. But the amber color, they weren't all amber. They could be different colors.
Really?
They could be the aquamarine. They could be clear.
Okay.
The amber color comes from coal being mixed in with the sands and the other minerals. But the interesting thing about this is it has a glass lid. Sealing lid.
Is glass.
Milk. Okay. This is milk glass. And this has the first logo that was used by the Ball Brothers Glass Manufacturing Company. And we believe Frank drew this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He's an artist, too.
Exactly. And it's all the block letters and all, you know, very pulled together. And, you know, we do have a logo sheet, so I don't know if the camera can see it very well, but this is the original logo that was used in 85, 86. So this was created around, or the original was created around 1885. Please don't let me get my centuries confused. This jar,
the lavender, you do not see a lot. So this is one of my favorites. I love that color.
The sun-colored amethyst, and I use that phrase intently, sun-colored amethyst. This was actually a clear glass jar when it was made, and it was made somewhere from 1900 to 1920 with the zinc cap. And of course, this is a mason jar because it has the screw cap.
Screw cap, yep.
But you have to use a decolorizing agent to get clear glass. And in this case, it was manganese dioxide. Okay. And here's what they learned. Many people would put their jars outside on the porch or on the deck or, you know, out in the yard. And with the sun, the jar would start to turn first pink, and with more exposure and depending on the amount of the manganese dioxide in the complex, first pink and then maybe a deeper sort of aquamarine, and then eventually you get the darker shades of amethyst.
That's beautiful.
Now this is highly prized by collectors. However, for any novice collectors that may be out here, beware, because these are produced artificially using sped up ovens and light boxes and all this type of thing to get the amethyst.
Not the natural way with the
sun.
So
you want to be really careful collecting these.
Okay. And this
jar is cool for a couple of reasons. This has a swirl pattern. I
don't know if you can see it, but it's just like swirled
I hope you
in and
can
out
see
here.
it, that it's not just a straight color. It's sort of that green aqua color with amber,
like the amber
swirling through it,
which
is very cool. Also very highly prized. This was built. I keep saying built, made 1900, 1905, and the streaks. And the greater the contrast in the streaks, the more it's desirable. The other cool thing about this is this has the logo that's called a triple L logo. So it's got the script ball, and I don't know if you can see it, but right here, there's another little loop for the underscore.
Kind of like a tail, almost.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Let's see if we've got a better picture of it for folks. That would be this,
really neat.
This logo right here. Now, the funny thing about that was that, and this was actually written up in a collector's guide to fruit jars, it was noted that the mark led people to believe it was 3 L's and that Ball didn't know how to spell their name.
We're good at spelling.
So one of the most curious situations in fruit jars that existed.
That's neat. I haven't seen one of those with that logo either. So it's kind of a really cool story to hear about.
That's a very cool logo. This is the Sanitary Sureseal Jar. There's really no major difference between the Sureseal jar. But for a while, they were using the word sanitary. We're not entirely certain how long they used this. This one was produced 1913, 1914. It's the first of the glass lid wire bale jars of the 20th century that carried the Sureseal label.
Great. So it has like two things that are really unique.
Right. And the early blue books actually show this along with one of the Mason screw top jars in there on the backs or inside the covers or that type of thing. The Mason Sureseal really didn't hit till about 1915 as a regular thing. They're exactly the same as the Sureseal. I don't.
Just a different name.
No,
a unique
I guess
name.
maybe they got tired of putting this in the mold or something, so they took the sanitary part out.
Well,
and you'll notice that this jar and our next jar, which is over here, see how we can move around here. The Ball Ideal jar, also wire bale, are both blue. Actually, even our next jar is blue. They are what came to be known as the Ball Blue.
The Ball Blue, yep.
Now, again, the intent was to make clear glass, but they started using the sands from the sand dune just south of Lake Michigan in Indiana.
I do remember that story,
And the mineral content of the sands is what made the jars blue. Now, Ball did not own the right to make a blue jar, but before very long it became very identified with the Ball Blue jar. Now, this has the Ideal signature on it, so that's another extra little collecting point of a jar like this. So but the Ball Blue is just it's pretty.
It is very desirable.
It is very desirable.
If you go online, people are collecting these jars and using them for all different purposes, for decoration and for vases and all kinds of different things. It's amazing what you can do with a jar.
And I like the squared off ones.
Yeah, that one's pretty. That one's pretty neat.
I think they're very cool.
The square.
And actually, there was another company in our area called Hemingway that also used the same sands. So you'll see blue glass insulators for electrical wires, also made about the same time, the same way.
Well, I think we have just a couple more seconds left. So do you want to share
I'm
maybe your favorite? Yeah, I thought that was your favorite.
This jar is known as the Southern Methodist Orphans jar, and it's got the Ball logo, Ideal logo here, but on the back it says property of Southern Methodist Orphans Home, Waco, Texas. So in the 30s, during the Depression, the orphanage was just getting more and more children, and they were having difficulty feeding them. And so they came up with a great idea. A businessman sponsored them. So they went to Ball, got 16,000 of these quart jars made, and they distributed them throughout the community, through their churches, that type of thing, and said, you know, when you're canning for your own family, put this jar in the mix and fill it, and we'll come pick it up, or you can bring it back to church or whatever, because almost everybody had gardens then, and everybody was canning, and they couldn't ask them for money because nobody had jobs.
Right.
So, but this was something that everyone could do, and they could feel good about it, helping their community, and the orphanage was able to feed their kids.
To feed the kids.
And you knew that the gift went straight to the children.
Right, which is phenomenal.
So
that's such a great idea.
I love that story. And you know, that's actually not a bad model for some things we could be doing today.
I was going to say, it's called Can It Forward Day, so we could be canning it forward to help other people.
Exactly.
That's a great, thank you so much for bringing these jars out and sharing in some of the history, because there are wonderful stories really behind every single jar.
There are.
So if you guys want to learn more, Betty and the group here at Minnetrista can definitely help you with that.
We have 200 and some online in the Minnetrista Heritage Collection online.
Fantastic. So you can actually check it out there then too.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Out of our 800 plus collection.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing them with us today.
Thank you, Lauren.